Hi everyone. Welcome to this session. It's presented by the Association for Events Management Education. My name's Adrian Bossey. What we're going to do is discuss research effectively. So this panel topic is moving forward sustainability theory, research and practice. The way we're going to run it is that we'll introduce ourselves in a moment. Then we'll just give you some examples of the research that we're currently doing that links events management, academia with industry. And then we'll pose some questions, and what we're really hoping for is some input from you guys. Because we strongly believe that academics and students at higher education and other levels can offer so much more than just kind of operational support for the festival and events industry. We believe that there is a role for academics, students and yourselves as practitioners to work together to try and understand and reflect on the challenges that face the sector in terms of sustainability. So that's what we're sort of trying to get to, that kind of sense of us sharing what we're doing and then us having perhaps a discussion around what feels important and vital in terms of the research need across the sector. So I told you my name, which is Adrian Bossey. I used to be an artist manager in the music industry, but I'm all right now. I'm in fact an academic now. I've been for about 20 years. I work at Falmouth University. I am head of subject for business and experience design, and I'm also chair of the Association for Events Management Education. I think we'll just go down the row, if you like, the little terrace that we have here. So,
hi, good afternoon, everybody. My name's Jane Ali Knight, and I'm a professor in festival and event management. So who ever thought there would be such a thing? But there is, which is great, and I think shows how our industry has developed, you know, that we have these titles now. And I'm based in Edinburgh, although I'm not from Edinburgh, as you can tell from my accent. I'm from a very famous sporting city and music city. And I've been at Napier for too long to say. And I've led a lot of our festival and event sort of education, research, and a lot of my work is commercial work, so it's working with industry, and I have worked with a few people in the room. So that's me.
Hi everyone, my name's Clare Mackay. I'm a senior lecturer at UE Bristol. I also lead our MSc in Events Management at UE, and I'm an assessor for a Greener Festival as well.
Hiya, I'm Briony Whitaker. I am also at UE Bristol, and I'm a senior lecturer in Events Management and the programme leader for our Business and Events Management undergraduate degree.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm going to try and talk very slowly because I am from Glasgow, with a very thick accent. So I appreciate we have an international audience as well. So I am from Glasgow Caledonian University, and I am a senior lecturer in international tourism and events management. And I also support the Business School's international growth, which is great because we get to support it worldwide, but I also get to take events, festival management to international audiences as well around the world, which is great. And I've been there now for 8 years, and I came from private sector, from TUI, so it's been a really interesting change into academia, which has been fantastic, and actually getting to share with you today some of the opportunities that we've managed to do with research, which has not only inspired students into the sector, but helped industry enhance as well, but we've learned from them as well, which I think is one of the most fundamental important parts of the collaborations that we can have.
So on that note then, we're going to share some examples of the work that we've done, and I'm going to ask Jane to start us off, please.
Okay.
And we have some slides to accompany
I think. Yeah, so obviously I'm an academic, so there has to be a PowerPoint. So apologies in advance. So I suppose the first slide, so does anybody know what the black and white picture is? What event that is? Woodstock, yeah. So the first event, the black and white one, is Woodstock in 1969, obviously just outside New York, and a very familiar scene, 400,000 people. And then the next picture is, I will say, it's a UK music festival last year, similar amount of people, and has anything changed? So I suppose that's what I'm starting off with, that, you know, the war on climate change has a long way to go. There's some great examples today of innovations and, you know, people are doing some brilliant things, but we've still got a long way to go, I think. So I've just explained who I am, and I didn't say that I'm an AGF senior assessor, so I've worked with Teresa and the team. I'm also an avid music lover and festival goer, and I have actually worked in the industry. I took 5 years off being an academic and went back into industry, and that's just some of the events that I worked on during that time. So I wanted to talk about some of the sort of recent projects I've been involved in. So I'm going to talk about those in greater detail in a minute. Some work that I've did with AGF, working with the British Council in Mexico and some festival organisers from Mexico. Some recent work we did with Event Scotland and Visit Scotland when we looked at net zero with regards to festival and events in Scotland. I've spoken at various events about sustainability, and I've also produced academic, sort of more traditional research in terms of journal articles, book chapters. But this is something we always show our students, and I'm sure a lot of you have seen it, but I think it really puts, you know, the heart of what we're talking about. It's not just about the environment, and I think we all know that now. You know, the discussion and the debate has really progressed. And I think this figure actually puts it really into perspective in terms of it's that triple bottom line, it's the environment, the economic, the social. We've heard a lot about these 3 different areas, but then there are even overlaps within those different areas as well. You know, things that are really, you know, prevalent at the moment, things like workers' rights, fair trade, you know, obviously the whole environmental debate in terms of the politicisation of that. So I think, you know, the sustainability agenda has really, really moved forward, and we're obviously trying to replicate that in terms of what we teach at university. I mean, we don't teach a course in sustainability. Sustainability underpins everything we do, every module, every course we deliver. And also, it leads a lot of both our student research, but also the wider academic debate. However, there is information overload. You know, there's so much information out there, and I really empathise with festivals and events in terms of, you know, how do they get started? You know, we've heard a lot about, you know, carbon calculators, carbon removal, you know, all these different things, you know. So, you know, if you're a small festival with a limited budget and limited resource, you know, what do you do? And I suppose that's a lot of the work that we do, is working with festival and events to try and demystify a lot of what's out there. So just talking about a couple of things we've done recently. One is some training. We do quite a lot of CPD. So we did a great course, Teresa and I, where we worked with 30 Mexican festivals online in Spanish. And Teresa and I don't speak Spanish, so that was very interesting. So there's this brilliant thing called Zoom Translate, which was amazing. So we did a 4-week program with the festivals, and I think what we learned a lot from them, but what we also learned was that we really are world leading in terms of what we're doing here in the UK and sort of wider Europe. And another outcome from that project was we produced a sustainability toolkit for those festival managers. And then we also had a follow-up event, which was really encouraging, where a lot of those festivals talked about how they had implemented a lot of the things that we'd actually discussed with them. We did a lot of sort of case studies with them. We had a few people who were actually here, like Primavera, spoke to them. And we had some Scottish festivals that spoke to them as well. And so that was really great. And we're hoping that we'll continue some of that work. We've got another project with British Council Mexico at the moment as well. And the other piece of recent work I want to talk about is the net zero research we did with Event Scotland. So this was qualitative research mainly, where we went and spoke to lots of festival and event organisers across Scotland, across all different types of events. And as you can see here, What we were looking at was, were they aware of what net zero was and what the targets were for Scotland, which are quite ambitious? Were they, did they have any sort of sustainability strategy, policy, any targets they were working towards? And then what sort of practices were they doing? And it crossed all these different areas here. And I think the encouraging thing was that everybody was really passionate about sustainability. There was lots of good practice, but it also, we came up with a list of really good recommendations for Scottish Government in terms of what the sector needs, which is obviously resource, funding, education. I mean, I'm sure it's the same the world over. So that's gone back to, it's not a public document, which is sort of good and bad, but the findings went back to Scottish Government, and hopefully there's going to be various initiatives that come out of that to help the Scottish sector working towards net zero. So that was a really interesting project we just completed. And then in terms of future research and future opportunities for discussion, maybe we can come back to this later, but there's just a few things there that I've put up. I suppose a few things I'll highlight are, so what I said before about the information overload in terms of the commonality and clarity of these tools. You know, everybody's using different tools. How do we, you know, measure progress? You know, we definitely need enhanced communication and commitment. You know, a lot of people are doing some really great things, but it's not disseminated into the wider sphere and shared. And obviously, you know, we constantly need more research, more best practice examples. So that's just some ideas, really, I suppose, to fuel some debate later. And then finally, that's me, and that is me in 1987 at Glastonbury. So you can guess what age I am now.
So Claire's going to talk to her research now.
Oh, sorry, I need my slides. I do. Apologies for the PowerPoint mishap. So I've been working with my colleague Dr. Ed Little on research on Boomtown Fair since 2019. So for the benefit of those of you who might not be familiar with Boomtown Fair, it's a music festival that is themed around the Faw city of Boomtown. And each edition of the festival has a storyline that runs through it, and cumulatively that constructs the story of Boomtown. And for the 11th chapter of the festival in 2019, the festival sought to communicate the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change's warning that we're running out of time to combat climate change through an alternate reality game to its festival goers. So every year at the festival, this alternate reality game takes place, and when festival goers visit the venues within the different districts, they're engaged by street theatre actors in different games, and the alternate reality game forms a bit of a treasure hunt. So through piecing together snippets of information, the festival goers put together their own perception of the story of Boomtown and its characters. So for Chapter 11 in 2019, the festival also ran a pre-festival alternate reality game. So festival goers were able to start learning about Boomtown and its characters through this pre-festival alternate reality game, which was run through social media and website and blogs pre-festival. So this formed another medium for the festival to communicate pro-environmental behaviour to its festival goers. So, following an interview with Boomtown Fair's Sustainability Officer and Creative Director to understand what they were trying to do with regards to communicating the IPCC's message, and also the different initiatives that they were introducing on site to encourage pro-environmental behaviour, I engaged with the pre-festival alternate reality game and the alternate reality game on site to understand, from the perspective of a festival goer, if and how festival goers were receiving and interpreting the IPCC's warning that Boomtown Fair were trying to communicate. And I also observed the different initiatives that were being used on site to encourage pro-environmental behaviour. So, for example, the festival had signs at the side of the stage informing festival goers about the amount of waste going to landfill. The artists were telling festival goers that we need to protect life, and they also had, for example, a respect campaign throughout the site encouraging people to respect the city. So through the insight that I gained through participating in the alternate reality game and from being on site at the festival, I developed a questionnaire which we used to conduct a post-festival survey of all of the festival goers who attended Boomtown Fair Chapter 11. And what we found through that survey was that radical citizens, which were citizens who had pledged to take their tent home and use the bins and such like, reported that since attending the festival, their awareness of the environment had increased. And this was also the case for the festival's eco-warriors, which were their green volunteers who were encouraging pro-environmental behaviour on the campsites. But importantly, this was also the case for ordinary festival goers. And in addition to the festival goers saying that their awareness of the environment had increased, all festival goers reported that since attending the festival, they wanted to engage in more pro-environmental behaviours in their everyday lives. But we know that there's often a gap between festival goers' pro-environmental intentions and their behaviours. So what we have tried to do this year is establish whether festival goers have adopted more pro-environmental behaviours between pre and post-festival. So at the moment we're in the midst of our final data collection phase, so it's 6 months post-festival, and we're collecting that data at the moment so that if we identified a change between pre and post-festival, we can then determine whether it's been sustained 6 months later. We haven't found a change between pre and post-festival behaviours. However, Boomtown festival goers are fairly pro-environmental anyway, and I think it also needs to be highlighted that, like the rest of the sector and industry, Boomtown were in the midst of their post-COVID recovery when the festival was staged in August. So they weren't in a position to implement as many initiatives as they had done for Chapter 11 to encourage pro-environmental behaviour. So it could be that if we'd conducted this research in 2019, we might have generated different findings. And likewise, if we conduct the research in the future, we might find something different. However, what we did find is that there is a strong relationship between festival goers' pro-environmental self-identity and pro-environmental behaviours. And that strong relationship is affected by festival goers' obligation-based motivation. So, in other words, festival goers anticipate feeling guilty if they didn't engage in pro-environmental behaviour, and so they feel obliged to for that reason. So I think that highlights the importance of environmental messaging at festivals and events, because perhaps if we weren't doing so much to encourage festival goers to engage in pro-environmental behaviour and to educate them on climate change and the amount of waste going to landfill, then perhaps we wouldn't stimulate that obligation-based motivation to encourage them to engage in pro-environmental behaviour. And finally, since we found this strong relationship between environmental self-identity and pro-environmental behaviour, we've looked at it in relation to different pro-environmental behaviours, and we've found that there's a strong relationship between festival goers' environmental self-identity and their purchasing behaviours. So if Boomtown Fair want to encourage festival goers to make sustainable purchases, such as buy a tent that will last, they should do so by trying to tap into their festival goers' environmental self-identity. And this will be effective, but to an increasingly slightly less degree, to encourage festival goers to recycle, to encourage them to perhaps reduce their energy use in their everyday life, and to encourage them to eat sustainably. However, when we look at travel, the situation is completely different. So in the case of travel and environmental self-identity, there's no relationship whatsoever. So it doesn't matter how environmentally friendly festival goers see themselves, that doesn't affect their choice of transport. And the main factor that does affect their choice of transport is money, and that's closely followed by distance. And I think since one of the main challenges that we continue to face is trying to reduce the carbon footprint of attendee travel, this means that we need to ask ourselves, is there any way that we can make travel cheaper for festival goers? And can we reduce the distance that festival goers and attendees have to travel to get to our events?
So Briony's going to talk about her research now.
Hi, I firstly have to say I'm still currently on maternity leave, so I'm suffering with a severe case of baby brain. And I also don't have slides, so this is just going to be a stream of consciousness. So just strap in on this journey with me, because this could go anywhere. So I started my research journey when I did my master's, which was actually at UWE. And I loved it so much, they couldn't get rid of me, so I stayed. And I looked at Glastonbury Festival and volunteer motivation. And then when I finished my dissertation, I found the whole concept of researching at music festivals something really, really interesting, something that I hadn't really considered as a career before. And I spoke to my supervisor and said, what can I do next? And she said, do a PhD, which is great, and I'm still going. Having a baby in the middle of it was probably not the best idea, but there we go. So my research now, it's gone on a bit of a journey. I think that's common when you speak to all PhD students. What you start out with at the beginning, what you're setting out to find, is very different from what you actually find out at the end. So it has definitely gone through some changes. I've done research and collected data at festivals before. I've been to Shambhala, I've been to Glastonbury, and we've taken students with us to collect data from attendees there. And we found some really, really interesting things. So when I have been to collect data at these festivals, pre-baby and pre-COVID, we were focusing on the sustainability interventions and the attendee attitudes towards the interventions. Primarily linking it to behaviour change theory. So if we take an example of a sustainability intervention, something like offering a financial bond onto a ticket price and encouraging people to take back a bag of recycling so they can have their money back at the end, we were then asking people their attitudes towards those sustainability interventions. And there were really varied responses that I personally wouldn't have necessarily thought of beforehand. So at one festival, there were different levels of reward that you could get by taking your rubbish back. So one level, the basic level, was you got your tenner back that you'd paid extra on top of the ticket. But the top level, where if you took your rubbish back and you recycled it and separated everything yourself, you got a festival gift pack, which was worth £30. But when we spoke to people, attendees in the campsites, most people wanted the money back. So they were deterred from actually doing the option that we wanted them to do because they wanted the lesser reward. What was interesting as well was we sometimes found that some of the festivals that we've been to were so tidy anyway that they didn't actually have rubbish at the end to recycle. So some people felt that they'd missed out on being able to get their money back because they didn't have any rubbish, or found that they were actually creating rubbish to take back to get their money back. And then that's really, it's common with when you have festivals where there's a large student population, they want their money back. So it's about understanding how we pitch sustainability interventions, where I've started to focus my research. So at the moment, I'm currently doing my PhD, very slowly, with a 1-year-old, where I am looking at people's attitudes and values towards sustainability whilst specifically in the festival. So as Claire mentioned, there's this massive attitude behaviour gap. So people can go along to a festival with every intention of picking up after themselves, taking their tents home with them at the end. But then actually, when it gets to the end of the festival, it's Monday morning, they're hungover, people just can't be bothered, they've got long trips back to the car, and they just leave their waste behind, which is maybe not something they set out with the intention to do, or maybe they did. So it's trying to address this attitude behaviour gap and encourage people to pick up after themselves, or to only bring what's necessary. And to understand their values actually while they're at the event. So while somebody might, outside of the festival, I was listening to the talks earlier and hearing about how now Gen Z are really keen for sustainability to be a large part of everything, really. Actually, when we've gone to festivals, it's the younger people who leave their stuff behind at the end. Not all of them, but it's people that certainly in the research that I've done already, it's a large proportion of the younger people who are leaving stuff behind. So where's that disconnect coming from? So there are already, in research, there are already value segmentation frameworks focused on sustainability. So how we can separate and segment people based on their attitudes and values towards sustainability in daily life. So my research is going to be looking at how we can create one of these for music festivals specifically, whilst inside the music festival, so that we can design sustainability interventions based on those specific segments. And I think that's one of the things that's really important to understand, is that a blanket approach, one size fits all, just doesn't work. We see that with things like outside of a festival context, something like the Stoptober, the Stop Smoking campaign, social marketing campaign. If one size fits all worked, nobody would smoke, because that campaign would have worked on everyone, but it doesn't. So it's really, I'm going to fall off my chair now. It's really important that we understand that who we're targeting these particular interventions to, in order to make them as successful as we possibly can. I hope that made sense. But yeah, I'm looking for, I've blanked this summer out to do data collection. So if anyone has a festival that they would like me to come and collect data at, please let me know. I'm desperate to collect data in as many festivals as I possibly can, and it would be great to involve industry professionals in putting this segmentation framework together. Thank you.
So following on, I think the diagram Jane showed about the 3 different areas of sustainability pillars. I come from it from a different maybe perspective, which is the social side. So my research started with drag queens and RuPaul's Drag Race. So some of you will be, how did you get from RuPaul's Drag Race to sustainability? But I did, and we did. And what we started to establish was, and many of you will know here, and it's been talked about today, and it's come across quite a lot, is the role of your festivals, the role of your events, the role of the venues in creating a safe space for the people that attend. And I think we'd all agree on that, no matter what communities you're bringing together, the people you're bringing together, they're for that safety, that safe space to celebrate and be who you want to be within that environment, free of prejudice, free of fear. And that's what we found within our research into drag culture. But it started to extend beyond that, and what we started to really see was sustainability doesn't come to the forefront when people don't feel safe in a space. So what people start to do is negate sustainable practices, negate sustainable interventions, because they don't feel secure in the space. And that's something we really started to find out and became really interesting in our research, is that dimensional approach between well-being and safety and sustainability, that they're not separate entities, that they're actually combined, that if we can have people feeling safe in our spaces or events, we can make them more aware of the sustainable practices that they can be involved in, which then they will then take home and embed in their everyday life. And that's where our research has gone from RuPaul's Drag Race to sustainability. And that's what we are looking at, is how now do we correlate that approach of ensuring that there is that safety, that well-being within the venues, the festivals that they're at, so that we can encourage more sustainable practices. And it's been a really interesting journey. It's been quite exciting to look at something that's maybe not always identifiable, and ensuring that people are aware of that. And being able to portray that to our students that we are teaching allows them to think about it when they leave and they start to go into graduate roles, or they start to go into the different roles that they're going into. And that's something that we look at within the university that I work at, and many of us look at in our universities, is how do we maintain that valuable research and apply it from that theoretical construct to practice? Because I know many of you will go, if a students come through and they can tell me all about the theory, but where's the practice? And we see that, and that's what we guide, and we're trying to make it become apparent for them. And that's where we can work with industry, and the work that we've been doing with Revenge in Brighton is that we can then apply that into the context so that our students can learn from the theory that we are doing with industry and with our students. And part of the research that I've been engaged with at the university or with my research colleagues has been that applied approach on bringing students along with us and having them engaged in the process from the start to the finish. So we've worked on learning journeys where we've taken students out to Finland, to a place called Lahti, and they've worked with the national park, Salasulpa, and they've worked with the city where they've done research with the destination to see how they can support sustainable events or new initiatives for international tourists from their perspective. And then we've engaged that in our teaching. And where I'm going with this is that part of what we do, and I'm doing now, is looking at the Sustainable Development Goals. So we're all aware of the Sustainable Development Goals. They're informing a lot of the decisions that we make in universities and how our degrees are developed alongside them. But it's trying to break them down through the research that we do and showing that they're not siloed, that actually, if you can work on one, it'll interconnect with another. So if we can engage in quality education through the research that we do, we will actually impact inclusive societies. And what that then does is it impacts the well-being of communities, which is SDG 7. So you can see that the research that we're trying to do is moving into that applied approach that will then impact our students and hopefully the businesses that they go into and work with. And that's something we're really passionate about. And one thing that we can really do in event management and festival management education, and it's working with industry that's really allowed the research journey and the research approach to be interesting and valuable to me and to the students that we work with. And the last point I'll make is that when I did my master's, I was really lucky 9 years ago, the fear that it was 9 years ago, and I did a consultancy piece of research in my dissertation, and I worked with Resource Efficient Scotland, testing training tools on a business. So saying that if the employees did the training, if it would change their mindset on sustainable practices in the business, but then extending it to the home. And that's what got me inspired in applied research. And that's what I'm now trying to engage with our students. And I guess that's part of probably the discussion that we'll go on to, is the interconnectivity between what we can do at the universities, what you can do in your businesses, and how we can inspire what are the next future generation that we're teaching coming into the field.
So it falls on me just to talk a little bit about the area of research that I cover, and then we'll open this up for more sort of discussion and for questions. So I'm from Falmouth University, and at Falmouth we have undergraduate provision in sustainable festival management and also creative events management, and that's on campus. And then we decided that we wanted to develop an online offer, which is our MA Creative Events Management. And then we thought we could bolt on some short courses to that provision so that we can work to train industry. So we created, firstly with Teresa and Greener Festival, a 2-week online course, and then we created a second online course with Attitude is Everything, and they're kind of hardwired into that MA Creative Events Management. So it means, I'm going to try something really risky now, it means that I'm always really proud when I come to GEI, because I know that I'm going to bump into some graduates. So Are there any graduates of those courses or current students in the room at the moment? Just show me your... Yeah, there are a few. Yes, there you go. Loads. Fantastic. Thank you. So that's the first thing to say, is that we're really passionate about working with industry. And I'm just going to tell you a little bit about the research that I'm currently doing, which actually sort of drew its inspiration in part from, or a particular element of it, drew its inspiration in part from one of those short courses. So I'm interested in the digitisation of content. When I was an artist manager, we used to get really criticised for doing things like putting banks of TV sets up when we headlined Glastonbury, and everyone said, that's not live. And then we were like, and you haven't got a drummer either, that's not live. And you're not a real... Anyway, so we were like, well, we're headlining, so pull the bones out of that. But anyway, so right from that point in my career, I was quite interested in the idea of what a real live experience was. And introducing digital into that kind of muddied the water, and I tripped over this concept called liveness, this sense of is it live or is it recorded, what's the difference, what experience am I having? And then that kind of intertwined with the short course that I was running, that we developed and that we run with Attitude is Everything, which is about accessibility to the live music industry events and festivals for people who are deaf or disabled. And I started to think about how liveness, what a standard state of liveness is, and how some of those people might benefit from a sort of enhancement in a state of live appreciation. So, for instance, when I go and watch a live performance at, I don't know, the Eden Project, which is a fantastic venue for live performance, just saying, I'm watching the music. There's usually the tallest bloke in the room stood in front of me, or in the fields in front of me, waving the biggest mobile device. So part of the time I'm watching the music on that. So I've immediately kind of occluded my sense of the actual live stage. And I'm also listening to the music, okay? And that's my two main... And then I'm kind of getting a vibe, sort of community-type vibe from the crowd. And those are the three things, especially those two senses, watching and listening. But imagine if you couldn't hear. How would you engage with that live sound? And what some people who are deaf or have hearing impairments do is things like take balloons to shows, and then they feel the vibrations on the balloon, and they can feel the vibration of the music, and then they can start to engage with what's happening with the music. So I discovered some guys who have created a haptic dance floor. So this is a dance floor that you can stand on, and it's got speakers in it, and you can feel the music. And I went to a demo, and some people from the Royal Opera House were there, and so they put some opera on. And I was expecting it to be quite bassy, but this opera singer hit a relatively high note while I was standing on the floor, and it went all the way up one leg. It kind of hung around here for a bit, and then it went down the other leg. And I thought, wow, there's definitely something to this. So my forthcoming research project that's coming together at the moment is that I'm working with that. I'm bringing that flooring down to Falmouth for 4 days. I'm also bringing some artists called Deaf Rave, who some of you may have heard of. They're really inspiring. They completely do what it says on the tin. They're deaf ravers. They do live signing as they perform. And so they're going to come down and perform. I'm using that. They're going to work with some Falmouth students. I'm hopefully inviting some festivals. I have invited, and I'm hoping some festival organisers are going to come down as well. So there's an opportunity for people to engage, for people that book festivals to see these artists, but also to see the technologies. And what the Deaf Rave guys are doing is they bring down some haptic jackets. So these are Wooja, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, but hey, I'll go with that, Wooja gaming jackets that have been kind of tweaked a bit so you can, well, not tweaked, but they're being used to appreciate live music. And so that's the research that I'm doing, and I'm involving community groups within that. I'm trying to do what we call knowledge exchange, so trying to promote the businesses themselves, the flooring guys, the jackets, the artists, and then I'm aligning that in a sort of mad matrix with some research around liveness and around people's experience of being on the floor or wearing the jackets and what their perceptions of a sort of spectrum of liveness might be. So that's my work. I think I might need to get my coat. Thank you. So what I've just described sits, in my mind, it sits within the sort of social pillar of sustainability. So when Jane was talking earlier and she showed that excellent diagram of the circles that interlink, and you've got the three pillars, the classic three pillars of sustainability, so environmental, economic and social. In my mind, that particular piece of work for me sits within that social strand. But what I'd like to do is sort of throw open a discussion really to colleagues, which is just around the key areas perhaps of broad areas of sustainability theory. So there might be about something around those themes, or it might be, you know, other options that we feel are kind of important and that we can kind of bring to the table and share with you guys.
Well, I think it's definitely a really topical an area that's of interest to students. I mean, every year we get so many dissertations looking at sustainability, and I think often it's purely environmental impacts. And what we try and do now is we try and broaden that out and steer that out and say, it's not just about the environment, you know, the social, I think, is where there's a lot of really interesting research and practice going on, particularly around accessibility. You know, I've done a lot of work with like people with dementia, you know, so the other end of the spectrum. So I think, like for me, that whole area around social impacts, social sustainability, ethics, you know, the ethics of sustainability, I think is really interesting as well. Obviously, there's a lot of research around behaviour change, you know, the research that Clare and Briony are doing. I think there's a lot of research looking at audience, festival goers, maybe not much on the supply chain. I think that's probably an area that's missing. You know, the supply chain is really critical, and a lot of innovation is coming through the supply chain, and there's not really much research looking at that supply chain. And then I suppose the other area is business benefits, you know, which is the important area when we're going to funders, when we're going to sponsors, you know, when we're trying to, you know, justify getting resources into our festivals. So that whole economic piece is important, and I think again it's like looking at how we measure it and making sure there's consistency across that measurement. So like for me, there are lots of really interesting areas, and I suppose the other area which you just touched on is digitisation, you know, in terms of how that impacts on sustainability and politicisation as well, in terms of, we've talked about, you know, people. You know, this is a big part now of a lot of manifestos. You know, the Labour Party are trying to champion it in Scotland with the SNP and the Green Party. So, again, that whole politicisation of it as well.
And what I'm hoping is that as we talk, you can perhaps start to hear things that are of interest to you that sit within this and interest of you, in terms of your professional practice. And that might be as a festival organiser or as someone working in the supply chain. You know, there's kind of research topics for everyone is what I'm hoping we'll get from this. I think Dan is really keen to come.
Yeah, I think one of the areas that's really quite interesting that's growing within that sphere is around about the economic, and it's the use of green marketing. So we're seeing green marketing drive, and I sit within the fashion marketing, tourism and events department at my university. Not mine, the university, I wish. No, and what we find is that a lot of students previously within marketing and fashion have been talking about the use of green marketing in order to promote consumers to buy product. And it's interesting now that's now delving into what students want to understand is green marketing within the festival, events and tourism sector, is it driving consumer behaviour? And what element of it is it actually within the green marketing perspective? And to break down green marketing, it's using your ethical products, or if you are an ethical organisation or you use sustainability to promote your business as an opportunity for consumers to buy with. And because we know that the Gen Z, the younger generation, are really engaged with sustainable practices, we're finding that more and more our students want to understand, does green marketing matter? Or is green marketing actually really working for businesses? And it's now driving into the festivals and events sphere that they're looking at. So we're finding that impacts, that economic value is green marketing effectively now greenwashing? And it's trying to discuss that theoretical approach, but it's our students that are inspiring that as well. So I think that's something that we've started to see where we are and what our students are looking at.
So there's a definite challenge there, isn't there, in terms of that potential for greenwashing? And I just, on challenges more broadly, I wonder what the challenges are that you guys find as academics in terms of working with industry. I'm not asking for a top 10, although I am historically from the music industry, so I wouldn't put it past myself.
I think it's probably the other way around. I think it's the challenges industry have working with us in terms of, you know, universities are huge beasts, they're bureaucratic, you know, sometimes it takes a long time to deliver stuff. Like that project that we did with Event Scotland, we literally had to deliver in about a month. And that was really challenging for us because, you know, we're used to working with much longer time scales. Just things like, you know, we'd probably finish the project before we'd even got it through the system, you know, in terms of the finance and all that. So I think often, you know, I know when we often bid for work, we're seen to be expensive, you know, we're seen to be time, you know, less time efficient, I suppose. So I suppose, you know, that might be interesting to see what people say that, but it might be some of the challenges that industry see with us. And I suppose with industry, the other way around, it's proving the value, you know, what value we can bring in terms of, you know, a body of people, in terms of the students, in terms of the academics. We do have a little bit of money sometimes that we can put, you know, to research and to research projects. And, you know, I know where I work, you know, we're a modern university, and we're very keen to be applied and to, you know, to have meaning, and you know, we really pride ourselves on our industry links and our industry, you know, negotiations. And so I think it's definitely about collaboration and understanding, in terms of understanding where we can work together, what's realistic and what isn't.
I'll go for free. I'll do research for free. Cost isn't a problem for me.
We also see that our students are really innovative and they come up with such impressive ideas in the classroom, and that can extend to organisations. And I think that sometimes that was Jane used demystifying to work with businesses and organisations. Our students want to go out and solve problems with you and help you, and a lot of the time they have access to the markets that you're interested in, and I think that's something that we really want to engage more in, is how can we support our sector to grow through our students as well? Because it's not all about research output for us, it's part of it, but it's also about inspiring the students into the different facets of the industry that they don't always know about. So being able to open them up to working with different organisations, public, private, third sector. And it sometimes does look, so for instance, this year we were working with Nike, we've worked with Virgin Hotels, which are big organisations, but we want to work with local, smaller community organisations, and some of that demystification is around time and the amount of time that sometimes you might find you have to put in, but that's not a lot of time, because the students want to take on that interesting work or problems that you want solved in your organisation. So if you have any of that, bring it to us. We can set up a project within a module as well. That's the kind of things that we want to do to make it applied.
I think just sort of tacking on to the end of that, and this might be off on a slight tangent, in terms of the academic side of events management, the literature, although it's growing, is still quite small. If you compare it to a subject like marketing, actual specifically events management focused literature there is a lot less of it, and we are trying to encourage our undergraduate and our postgraduate students to engage in research, because we want to develop the amount that there is. So yeah, we are always encouraging students to have an active interest in research and to engage in research projects. And yeah, some of the ideas that they're coming up with are great, and it's just finding those links to industry then that they can then go and conduct research projects for you guys essentially, and collect data and build the existing body of knowledge that there is for academic events management literature.
So just to come in just at this point, just to say, I'm sensing there's a couple of questions in the room, so I don't know if we need microphones for that. Brilliant, thank you. Just to also do a little tiny announcement. It's nowhere near as fantastic and amazing as A Greener Future, that announcement, but it's just to say that at AEME, we talked about what we were going to do in terms of coming and doing this panel, and we thought that we'd also try and sort of put our money where our mouth is in a small way. So we have set up a small, it's kind of modest but useful fund for joint projects with, you know, between industry and academic institutions. So if anyone is hearing anything, wants to, you know, contact the talk to us about it. And equally, we will be encouraging all the institutions in AEME to reach out to all their industry contacts and just make public the fact that we have got this small fund looking for initial pieces of research that we can do with you guys. So just wanted to share that. And in the time that it took the microphone to sprint round, thank you so much. And I think it's this gentleman in the front.
Can I just say, Adrian,
yes,
just to say what AEME is for people who don't know it? So it's the Association of Event Management Educators, and it was started about 20 years ago, maybe. And it's basically, when we started it, there was probably about 10 providers in there. So across the UK, people delivering festival and events education. And I think now there's something like 70. So again, that shows how the industry has expanded and professionalised. So it's a membership body. I think, are there any industry members?
No, and it's mainly UK members as well. In the past, we've had a small number of international members, but at this point in time, it's academic members, and it's from the UK. But don't hold that against us. Yeah. Thanks for that, Jane. That's really helpful.
Hi, I'm Mario from Malta. Regarding marketing thing, from what I've learned from Falmouth University, not just sustainability research, but also some medical research as well. I used both issues, sustainability and medical, so that I could get marketing, like for example, waste management. I spoke to a beverage company. I explained why we're going to use this sustainable objective, because it links to this medical condition. And he helped us out. He sponsored all the event regarding waste management. Even so, regarding hybrid electricity generators, in that sense, we had a sponsor for 2 large generators. The thing is that sometimes in Malta, some people, it's like a buzzword, sustainability. What is sustainability? What does it mean? Is it waste management only? But you have to explain why sustainability, and especially the medical effect it has. When you explain that it could, if you don't use sustainability well, you can end up with an hospital with a respiratory case or a lung issue, something like that. That will make it a bit conscious people, and you get help for sure.
Yeah, it's about the communication to the consumer and how they view that. And that's why, I mean, many of our consumers that use products or services, they don't know effectively what green marketing is because they're not in that field. They just see it as marketing. So if you're offering 10 pence off your drink because you bring back a cup, they don't recognise that that is green marketing, but the organisation know they're using it for that purpose. So the interest within the organisation or for students has come from, does that matter to the consumer, or do they just care that the company's sustainable? Is that what's driving it, or is it breaks down to the brand equity, which is about, is it just because they're loyal to the brand? But it goes to meaningful. It's the meaningful communication that behind the decision to green market is actually because the principles of the organisation is striving for sustainable practices for its consumers and for the business itself. And I think that's something that you've touched on, which is really important as well.
Does anyone else want to come in on that? No? Okay, so what we'll do is we're going to continue the conversation, but if there are other questions, I'm really happy to... Oh, there's another question. There's loads of cool. Can we go 1, 2, 3? I can count to 3. There you go.
Hi. I wanted to touch on the societal or social pillar that you and Jane also talked about, because a lot of what has been talked about today is, of course, eliminating or downsizing the negative ecological impact of events. Now, I'm coming from a governmental perspective where we fund conferences but also public events, etc. And we are really interested in looking into the positive societal or social benefits of events, because it's often stated, but I personally found that there's not much of a body of research on what do events really, what is the effect in the long run on society, on certain communities? And I was wondering if you could elaborate on that, if you have any interesting studies, any institutes or personal experiences.
I think there is a lot of research starting to be done in that area now. I think a lot of the challenges are It tends to be qualitative, so it takes longer. It needs to be longitudinal, because often you're looking at people's attitudes, so it can't just be measured at one moment in time. So things like the economic impact are so much easier to measure, you know, like a lot of things, that have been discussed, they're so much easier to be measured, but the societal change, there aren't the same tools there, you know, a lot of those tools still need to be developed. But I think there are interesting projects, like in Australia, they're doing quite a lot of work around this, looking at societal impacts. In Edinburgh, the Edinburgh festivals are doing some really good work. They've just published their vision to 2030, which is a really great document to look at, and society underpins a lot of it. It's about community engagement, you know, it's not about numbers anymore, it's about value. I think that's the big change. So I think there is some research coming out, but I think there's still a lot of research. So we need PhD students to come and research this area for us.
I think it's really interesting. So fundamentally, events are a kind of ancient thing, aren't they? That ability to come together, which is, you know, and we saw the kind of importance of that and how people felt about it over the pandemic, didn't we, during the lockdowns? And it's a kind of fundamental, almost like a right that we should have. But however, we need to set that against the fact that festivals and events fundamentally are exclusive, and they exclude in a variety of ways. And so I did a piece of research around the cost of attending Glastonbury. So the first year I went was 1981. If I'd have paid, it would have been £8. And then I benchmarked that using government stats against 2019. And I didn't go, but if I'd have gone, it would have been £258 plus a £8 booking fee. What do you think? In fact, no, I'm not going to do this because there's going to be too many people shouting the answer. According to the government stats, £8 in 1981 was worth £32.26 in 2019. So in other words, all the rest of that is an added cost to people to attend a festival, right? Above inflation price increase. Now, there's lots of good reasons for that, huge fences, all the rest of it, but ultimately, that's pricing people out of attending that festival. And I think that's, you know, prices is something that's gone up across the sector to some degree. So there's something around price, there's something around all of the protected characteristics under the Equality Act in the UK. So that's everything from, you know, pregnancy through to gender, through to sexuality, through to disability, and another 5. So yes, events can have a fantastic impact. Yes, they speak to something that's really core in us as human beings that need to come together and celebrate. But no, they're not. Not all of us can do it equally. And I think that from a sustainability point of view, that falls into that diagram that we shared of the pillars of sustainability. And I think it's a fundamental challenge to everyone in this room, you know, whether they be academic or you know, events organisers, etc. So that was quite a long answer, and I'm supposed to be chairing. Sorry. Does anyone else want to?
I would maybe say that I think there are actually a lot of examples of events that contribute to a sense of community and foster inclusion, and I think there are also examples of events that have created a positive social legacy in terms of communitas and social capital. I think what is perhaps lacking that maybe we need to do is some kind of large-scale research project that looks at a variety of events to try to capture that data.
Only thing I would add to that is, it's coming from maybe a Scotland perspective, is Scotland hosted Homecoming 2014-2009. There's a lot of research around that which has actually been really interesting, that the reason behind that was about social legacy, about creating national identity through storytelling, and that's transitioning out even further. 2 years ago was the year of waterways, last year was the way of storytelling. It's about using community events to create a sense of social impact to the societies they represent. But however, the challenge with that is during COVID, during the pandemic, the funding was cut for these community events. And we're looking at research on that at the moment, is how were they supported compared to some of the larger events. So that sense of community then gets lost because the event doesn't get supported the way that other larger scale operational events may have had. So it's a real challenge to tell that story. But it's easier, as Jane said, to show the economic value, because that's what will get the funding year on year. But as we see now with the sustainable pillars, is that social element is so important as well. So that's going to come into that story of supported, more funding, the value they have to the community. And like you said, I think there needs to be more shown about our festivals and our events and how they do that within the communities that they serve.
And I think there was a question from the gentleman in the front. Here comes the microphone, sorry.
Hi, thanks for this inspiring conversation. I'm a PhD student in Italy from Sant'Anna School of Studies, and I'm researching this topic. So currently doing a literature review, so I'm accepting the challenge of, of Brian. No, actually, my question was really close to the one done before. What I was wondering is, reading many articles, etc., I noticed that many studies are single case studies, which of course is due to the fact that there are no single policy formulas and so on. But I was thinking in terms of impact of such research, let's say in the medium long term. So in the sense that how can you actually do research on social impact in a good way, especially in terms of toolkits available and tools available, which is not as easy as for the environmental side, let's say, to do. And secondly, what maybe can professionals, practitioners in the field do to basically also boost some academic research, which is more longitudinal in the approach. Maybe funding issues, of course, is a crucial point, and also maybe it's more sort of academic perspective question, but I was curious to know your point of view about that, and also in terms of if there are already enough valuable tools and effective tools for measuring social impact, as well as there are already a few more for the environmental ones. Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Thank you.
There is an event impacts toolkit that was created, I think, for the Vancouver 2010 Olympics, so you might want to have a look at that. It's just the website's eventimpacts.com.
It's probably just really hard because the subjectiveness of social impact and what is a social impact changes as society changes, and it changes as governments change, and it changes as we change, because we change within the communities or the groups of society that we represent and how we feel. So it's a real challenge to then create one toolkit to cover all that. And that's where research like that's really going to be really interesting, because that's inspired you to look at that, and where we can then look at that with other businesses and other organisations to do that. And it's a challenge, yes, it will be, and you'll be reading lots in that, but it's a gap because there are so many different perspectives of what is a social impact. To me could be very different to yourself, so it might not be agreeable what we read in that toolkit that's represented.
I think a lot of festivals, are doing some really good work. Like, most festivals know their communities. They know the local community, they know the area they're in with. They've got to engage with them, because if you don't get your local community on board, then you're not going to have a successful festival. So I think a lot of festivals are doing some really great work in terms of, social inclusion, working with their local communities. And I suppose it's about measuring that and collecting data, So I suppose that's the beauty of things like doing the AGF assessments, because as part of the process, it is social. You're looking at measuring all those community impacts. So I think a lot of it has to come from within the festival sector, because nobody knows the audience and the local community like they do. They know it much better than we could do. Yeah. Just
firstly, commiserations on the lit review. I'm doing mine at the moment as well. I know it's really tough. We've got this. We can get there. I think in terms of just picking up on the longitudinal side of it, that was something that I originally, when I first started my PhD, that was what my study was meant to be. It was meant to be looking over 4 or 5 years at Glastonbury Festival, not necessarily the social impact, but the environmental impact. And obviously, because of COVID and then having a baby, that's just not been able to happen. But for me personally, as a researcher, I think that even when I've done this part of my career, my academic progression, it's always an area that I'm going to be interested in, that I will continue. So it is something that's constantly adapting and constantly changing, but I know that that's always going to be something that I will then want to reflect in my research. I'll always be wanting to see how it's changed, and it will be something that I look at for years to come. It won't sort of just be like I'll draw a line under it. It is something that I want to continue to research, and hopefully that's what other researchers will want to do as well.
That's just a very quick point, is the research that we've been doing into the LGBTQ plus community and their spaces is that the community, the venues know their community really well. They know that social perspective. But what's happening is that as that audience becomes more inclusive, is it's actually changing the perspective of how that community feel, because what they once may have felt was safety social is actually moving because the audience has become more diverse. So that's another facet of looking at that, is the community, is the festival, is the event, is this venue still engaging with the community it was there to service in the first place, while welcoming new communities as well. And that's where they can provide that education of the space that they're entering, is letting those attendees know what they're coming into, so that they can then be valuable to that community as well.
I think that I know there was one question over there, wasn't there? Is it still it would need to be a really quick question, and we'll give a really quick answer because we've got like 30 seconds. But if you, no,
The lady at the back, I think.
it was.
Yeah.
I've got a really bad voice, so I need the mic.
Don't worry.
It was more an open question or statement to you all. When you were discussing the idea of green marketing and if it's valuable or if it works or not, I think it's interesting because I'm coming from both perspectives. So I'm in my final year at uni, but I'm also working for Cambridge Folk Festival. And from the festival's perspective, I think 100% transparency is important. So like you said about celebrating the achievements we've got, but also acknowledging where we need to improve on in a sort of upfront way, rather than just being like, oh, we won't mention that because it's not amazing. Still mention it and still say that we need to address it. So I was wondering if you agreed with that or not. And then from the academic perspective, I know it is an issue on any scientific discipline of the fact that data access and open access and public access and making it accessible and then digestible to someone without an academic background is quite a big challenge in itself. So translating it to a way that the industry can access the information and the research that you've provided to like bridge that gap between the two.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. Sorry, the last few projects we've done, what we've done is research projects. We've sort of done like an industry report as part of it, which is digestible. You know, so we've started to do that now, or we've done dissemination events where we do like public engagement events and we disseminate it out to industry, because I don't believe in just like leaving research on the shelf. You know, it's for industry and it has to be used and it has to be read and it has to be digested in a form that industry want it in, really. Yeah.
And I think that's the point that we're going to leave this conversation. I'm going to say thank you so much to Dan, to Briony, to Clare and to Jane, and to thank you to you guys as well, because we really wanted to have this dialogue, and Teresa and AGF have facilitated it, which is much appreciated. So thank you very much.